Hey, good morning. How y'all doing? It is Well Red Beard. It's a damn fine day to talk about a book, and today we are here for the Pulitzer Project, episode 3. I am trying to read all the Pulitzer winning novels, fiction, books from 2024 and back. So I did 2024's The Night Watch by Jane Ann Phillips. Might just be called Night Watch. I did 2023's Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, and now we're doing the co-winner in 2023, Trust by Hernan Diaz. I really like this book, and again, I'm going to speak loosely here. Well, my understanding about what it takes to win a Pulitzer in fiction is that it has to be very American. I mean, very true to the time that it's written in, historical fiction, so to speak. Like the first book I read was post Civil War, um, loss of just a generation of men, and it took a look at insane asylums of that time, and then of course Demon Copperhead was all about the opioid epidemic in Appalachia, like in the 80s, and then this one is about the early 1920s, the rise of uh, American financiers. I don't know if I said that right, but and the surge of the stock market, and ultimately the 1929 crash of the stock market. But this book is told in such a original way, and I'll get into that. And yeah, I dug this book. Right now, it's 4 stars for me. So hey, let's get a little bit of synopsis, and then I'll kind of dig into it a little bit more. This synopsis is very fine print, so bear with me. Um, Even though the roar and effervescence of the 1920s, I'm gonna have to start over because I messed it up already. Even through the roar and effervescence of the 1920s, everyone in New York has heard of Benjamin and Helen Rask. He is a legendary Wall Street tycoon. She is the daughter of eccentric aristocrats. Together, they have risen to the very top of the world of seemingly endless wealth, all as a decade of excess and speculation draws to an end. But at what cost have they acquired their immense fortune? This is the mystery at the center of Bonds, a successful 1937 novel that all of New York seems to have read. Yet, there are other versions of this tale of privilege and deceit. Spanning a century, Hernan Diaz Trust elegantly puts four competing narratives into conversation with one another. At once, an immersive story and a brilliant literary puzzle, Trust engages the reader in a quest for the truth while confronting the deceptions that often live at the heart of personal relationships, the reality warping force of capital, and the ease with which power can manipulate facts. Yeah, so there are four different stories that are really about the same thing, but we open with Bonds. It is a fictional novel by Harold Vanner, and it so you can see that four different sections. Um, and it took me like I was probably halfway through the second one before I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I kind of see a little bit here, but I mean, I just thought there were four like unrelated stories initially. So, Bonds by Harold Vanner. Again, it's a fictional novel written about a fictional couple, Benjamin and Helen Rask, and it's about he's this financier. He's very standoffish, very introverted, but he meets Helen, who is also the same way. He is very, very um, risky, lucky. I don't know. It can't be luck, but he does things like his investing is so advanced, so risky that he actually causes the 1929 crash. He's the only one that managed to make money, but through his I don't know what you want to call it, short selling, is whatever it is. I'm not a finance guy. He causes the crash, and he does it not necessarily from a position of malice, but he's that doesn't really cross his mind, right? Like what's good for other people. Okay, so he's got this wife, Helen. She is very very into music and philanthropy, and has and the arts, and providing support for local authors and musicians, and upstarts, and has concerts in the house and this and that, and he supports all that, but then she had a family history of mental illness. She starts to kind of slip into that, and ultimately he takes her to a sanatorium in like Switzerland. Uh, you know, there's a drug company that's working on an experimental drug or experimental methods. It gets into like electroshock therapy and shit like that. And hindsight, and again, I don't know that much about this stuff, but hindsight, I think it's kind of common opinion that shit's pretty inhumane. But back then, it was, so like it didn't feel like he was submitting her to electric shock therapy because he was this vile human being. It felt like he was doing it because he loved her and wanted to save her. But anyway, like so like a drug company would come up with a new experimental thing, and he'd buy the drug company so that all the fucking effort went into that. And like the sanatorium, like you know, um, they didn't want to maybe do things the way he wanted them done, or the way that he had experts recommend that they be done. And so he would buy an entire wing of the sanatorium. And so he just bought everything, right? To have things ultimately go his way. Well, ultimately, his wife succumbs to this mental illness, and he goes on to continue to be a financier, to continue to make money, but nothing ever hits like it hit in that pre 1929, or really nothing ever hits like it hit before Helen Rask died. Okay, so that's bonds, and so then we go to the second section of the book, and in that section, hold on, let me get back over there. It's called My Life by Andrew Bevel, and Andrew Bevel is the real life version of Benjamin Rask. And his wife has also died. And he is putting out a book to be his autobiography. I mean, he believes, but knows that this Harold Vanner book, Bonds, is about him. And he doesn't agree. I mean, not only does he not agree with it, but he also believes it's kind of like a smear book on him. So, so much so that he buys the publishing house that owns the book, and and not so he doesn't like keep the book from, or he doesn't push the book out of print. He keeps this book in print forever, but never lets anyone buy a copy. Like anytime copies, if it does 1,000 copy print run, he will buy them all and pulp them all. So he is basically ruining the life of the author Harold Vanner. But in his telling of this, and it's incomplete. Like this is a written version of his story, but like it'll give you some information, and then it'll say, okay, we made some finance deals here, based off this. Add more information about that here, or Helen did all these philanthropic things with music and art. Add more information about that here. So you've got a whole section of this incomplete version of his side of the story. Similar, his his wife also dies. Of course, her name's not Helen Rask. His name's Andrew Bevel, but her name's Mildred. His wife also dies, but she dies of cancer. And she does go to the sanatorium in Switzerland, but again, it's for cancer. It's not for some mental illness. So, in both of these stories, I mean, Harold Vanner and Andrew Bevel's version of it, I felt like this guy was standoffish. He was, a businessman first. He was very, very into his own thing. I mean, he didn't necessarily want love, didn't necessarily want marriage, but once he got into it with Helen slash Mildred, he did love her. And in their own way, their own weird way. Again, they're both, um, very introverted type people. But in their own way, he did love her, and he did, you know, do everything to take care of her through to the end. Now, that's Harold Vanner's version of the story. That's Andrew Bevel's version of the story. So he hires a woman to be his secretary slash assistant, but what he's really hiring her to do is to write his story, is to complete My Life by Andrew Bevel, which we read in section 2. And but this part is told by Ida Partenza, is her name. That's who he hires. It's called a memoir remembered. So this is her side of the story, and of course it fills in some of the holes of Andrew Bevel's story. But this is Ida Partenza's story about her time with Andrew Bevel and trying to help him write this autobiography. And she digs, to get to find out more information. She, because in her mind, um, he's not trying to vindicate his wife. He's not trying to say, well, she was a good person. Um, she did not die of a mental illness. Um, but in her mind, like, he is trying to basically make this woman unremarkable. And that's actually a quote from the book that I'll probably read you. But trying to make her come off as unremarkable. And so I'm going to kind of stop giving a lot of details here because we're in the second half of the book. But she does a lot of investigation to try to find out the true story of Helen Rask slash Mildred Bevel. And she finds, in doing so, like, down the road, something happens. The autobiography is not actually ever published. She is still somewhat haunted. I mean, just driven to find out more. She finally finds Helen slash Mildred's journals, and she finds out a lot of information about that, about who she was and what she did, and maybe the man that society knew as this genius, this financial genius. Maybe all those great investing ideas didn't come from him. You kind of get where I'm going. So you again, uh, you spend two chapters, two sections of the book with a genius financier who loved his wife, but she was a philanthropist, a music lover. She was not any type of finance mastermind. And then as we go on, we're like, Andrew Bevel's trying to rewrite it. He's trying to vindicate her, but then we find out that there's some truth to what Ida Partenza thought, that um, in changing Harold Vanner's version of his wife's ending, he's really trying to protect um, his uh, the opinion of him, the his reputation of being this genius. So I don't know. It left me, because again, I spent half a book thinking about a guy that really loved his wife, and then I spent um, the other half of the book thinking about a guy that would try to make his wife small after she had died. And yeah, so there you go. But this model, this method of the way the story is told, was really, really good for me. Like, I really enjoyed this, the way it was told. Also the literary aspects, the one liners, the way things are written. I really enjoyed those too. Now I'm going to share a couple of those with you, and we'll see here. So I usually struggle when I try to do this. So all right. So one little thing about Ida Partenza, her father, her father is a what's the word I'm looking for? A I can't think of the word. It's not a refugee. It's not a foreigner. The word, he moved over here from like they have Italian background, and so he's kind of anti-American. He's anti-money. He's an anarchist, is what he is, and he's got his own printing press, and he prints like anarchist newsletters. So the fact that his daughter is helping him pay the bills by working for this financier is like a problem for him. But he is very anti-money, and so this is like a little bit about money here, and this is Bevel talking to Ida, I believe, about money and about what it is. And he said, why work at a place that makes one thing when I could work at a company that makes all things? Because that's what money is, all things. Or at least it can become all things. It's the universal commodity by which we measure all other commodities. And if money is the God among commodities, this, with my upturned palm, I drew an arc that encompassed the office and suggested the building beyond it is its high temple. So, you know, this is the high temple of all commodities. Um, all right, so this is also Bevel talking to Ida. Goodness knows the last thing I want is a writer. Damn them all. A secretary is what I need. I know you are an extraordinary stenographer and typist. I shall speak, you will take dictation, and from your essay here, I can see that you have a way with words. He looked at the page again. Carve our present out of the shapeless block of the future. I like that. And that is a recurring theme. Something about carving the present out of the shapeless block of the future. All right, let's see here. So she's talking about having read Vanner's book, Bonds, the first part of this book, Vanner's book. Yet back then, I had never experienced anything like that language. As it spoke to me, it was my first time reading something that existed in a vague space between the intellectual and the emotional. Since that moment, I have identified that ambiguous territory as the exclusive domain of literature. I like that because that's how I feel about this book, the vague space between the intellectual and the emotional. I got a couple more here. I might pass on them, but just want to check them out and see. Yeah, that's the part about him wanting to make his wife unremarkable. So I already said that, but let's read this last one. I have no idea what it was. I mean, I only marked. I mean, that's the problem. I used to read like this where I was constantly marking stuff like this, and then I got to where I was marking so much that I never actually used it when talking about the book. But now I'm also in a place where like I'll read 50 pages of this and not have my sticky notes, and then just wind up not marking. But all right, yeah, that's not important. So yeah, so 4 stars for me. A really cool book. Really enjoying the Pulitzer Project so far. Again, this is my third one. The next thing is right there. It is the Netanyahu's by Joshua Cohen. It won in 2022. So yeah, this is Trust by Hernan Diaz. 4 stars for me. I mean, probably a little higher than 4 stars, but not 5 stars. You get what I'm saying. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're enjoying all your books, all of them as much as I am. If not, you're reading the wrong damn books.